When Chuck's plane is flying over the Pacific Ocean, a strong storm suddenly occurs, and in that storm, his plane crashes. Because this is a private plane of the FedEx company, there are only 4 people on board, and the rest of the plane is carrying parcels. Their plane crashes into the Pacific Ocean, and after the crash, only one person survives, whose name is Chuck. Chuck sits on an airboat, and the ocean storm carries him away. When he opens his eyes in the morning, he finds himself on an island. On the island, he looks around, but there is no one as far as the eye can see. There are only coconut trees and mountains, but no human is visible on the island. He calls out loudly, but it doesn't help at all. After this, he writes "help" in large letters on the sand, hoping that a plane flying overhead might see it and come to his rescue. Night falls, and Chuck falls asleep. When he wakes up in the morning, the "help" he had written in large letters on the sand has been washed away. After this, Chuck writes "help" with large pieces of wood, because he knows that people will surely come looking for him. And when they arrive, they will see this sign and realize that Chuck is here and needs help. And along with Chuck, some FedEx packages have also washed up on the island, but none of them contain any food. Meanwhile, Chuck hears sounds several times, and when he looks around, no one is there. Then a coconut falls in front of him, and he realizes that it was the sound of the coconut falling. Now, since Chuck needs water and can't drink seawater, he has only one option for water, and that is coconut water. He gathers many raw coconuts, but breaking them open and removing their cover is not easy. Chuck has to struggle a lot with this. Later, he manages to open one coconut, but making a hole in it and drinking the water is very difficult. But finally, Chuck learns how to make a hole in a coconut and drink its water. Now, Chuck has coconut water to drink, and it has been 2 or 3 days since he has been here. He doesn't have shoes, and when he walks in the water, there are stones in it, causing him a lot of pain in his feet, and his feet are bleeding. After this, Chuck tears his pants in half and wraps them around his feet, because he sees a very high peak ahead. He decides that he will go to that peak and take a look around to figure out exactly where he is. And when he reaches the top, he sees something in the ocean. He quickly climbs down and goes toward it. When he gets there, he sees that it is the dead body of a pilot from his own plane. Seeing this, Chuck feels very sad and buries him. But before burying him, he takes the pilot's shoes and a flashlight, as these were the only 2 things that could be useful to him. Now Chuck has been on the island for many days, and he is alone. But gradually, he is also learning how to survive on this island. He has learned how to collect the dew that falls on the leaves at night and store it inside a coconut. Along with this, he is also learning how to catch fish to satisfy his hunger. He sharpens a piece of wood and tries to catch fish with it. In fact, this is a very old technique that indigenous people used, and Chuck tries to catch fish using the same method. But he doesn't succeed. On this island, the only food he has is crabs, coconut water, and the dew that collects on the leaves at night. That's all he has to survive on this island. One night, he sees a ship in the sea. Seeing it, Chuck becomes very excited and starts shouting loudly. But it is impossible for the sound to reach that far. He tries signaling them by lighting a torch, but it is also impossible to see the torchlight from such a distance. The next morning, Chuck decides that the airboat he arrived on the island with will be his means of escape, and he will try to leave the island by sitting in the same boat. He has now realized that there is no one here and no one is coming. However, when he tries to leave the island in the airboat, he faces huge waves in the sea, which do not allow him to go further. Instead, the waves push him back to the island. During this struggle, he also injures his foot, causing a lot of bleeding, and Chuck, exhausted and defeated, returns to the island. One night, it starts to rain, and Chuck goes inside a cave that he finds there. He lights a torch and falls asleep with the torch burning. When he wakes up in the morning, the torch's battery is dead. Now Chuck has nothing to provide light, and he also doesn't know how to make a fire. Now he goes to the boxes that belong to the FedEx company, which have floated to this shore. He opens each box one by one. He finds many things inside, but only 1 or 2 items are useful to him. He finds shoes that are for skating and have blades underneath. He removes the blades from them. Now he has something like a knife, which can easily cut coconuts and sharpen anything. But when the last package arrives, he stops before opening it and looks at it. There are golden feathers on it. He wants to keep it with him. It feels like it's giving him hope to return home. Then he sharpens a piece of wood and turns it into a tool. This time, he tries to catch fish and crabs with it again, and he succeeds in catching fish. Although he had already been finding crabs on the shore, catching fish had been almost impossible. The biggest problem that Chuck faces next is that he can't eat the crabs raw, so now he needs fire. He tries very hard to start a fire, but his hands get bruised in the process. When Chuck fails, he becomes extremely frustrated and starts yelling loudly. Later, while peeling a coconut, he gets the idea that if he rubs 2 pieces of wood back and forth, maybe he can start a fire. This thought comes to him because the method he had tried earlier to start the fire had caused his hands to get scraped. Now, he tries in a different way, and after much struggle, the fire finally lights up. After starting the fire, Chuck becomes very happy, and for the first time since arriving on the island, he feels joy. Along with that, there is a football among the items lying around, and it has Chuck's blood on it. He shapes it into eyes, a nose, and a mouth, and begins talking to it. The football has the name Wilson written on it, so he starts calling it Wilson. Now Chuck has a friend on the island, and that friend is the football. Chuck was suffering from something here, and it was the pain in his teeth. The pain in his teeth had been there for a long time, but he always avoided going to the doctor. Now, he had to break his tooth at any cost, and after much difficulty, he finally broke his tooth. As it broke, he fainted. Slowly, time moved forward, and now Chuck had been on this island for a full 4 years. In these 4 years, Chuck's entire appearance had changed. He used to be overweight, but now he had become very thin. His beard had grown very long, and his hair had become quite long as well. Chuck had now fully learned to live on this island. He throws a stick from a distance, and a fish gets caught in it, meaning he can catch fish from far away because he has been trying consistently for 4 years. Now, he is completely adapted to the environment and life here. Meanwhile, Chuck's friendship with Wilson has deepened even more. Chuck tells Wilson everything and talks to him all day long. One morning, while Chuck is eating fish, he hears a sound and rushes outside. There, he finds a steel sheet. Seeing the sheet, Chuck gets the idea that he can use it to escape from the island. Actually, the biggest obstacle to moving forward in the ocean from this island was the sea waves. Whenever Chuck tried to go into the ocean, the waves would send him back, and because of this, Chuck had been unable to leave the island for the past 4 years. Now he cuts down large coconut trees and takes them to the shore. He then builds a raft from them. However, building the raft is not easy. He faces many challenges. He decides that he will leave when the wind changes direction and will use the sail he found against the wind to give his raft a push. Just as people in ancient times used sails to propel their boats forward, Chuck uses the same technique to build his raft. And now comes the moment when the wind changes direction. Chuck keeps his friend Wilson in his raft and sets off. Now, he faces massive waves, but he manages to get through them. After that, he feels very happy. However, the endless ocean still lies ahead. He has no idea when he will find land or when a ship might spot him. Chuck has finally left the island behind. He had spent the last 4 years there, and today, after leaving it, he carries a hope within him that maybe, just maybe, he will finally make it home. But things weren't going to be that easy. He had to face rain, storms, and other challenges in the sea. However, Chuck managed to catch fish for food and collected rainwater to drink. He had gathered many coconuts to collect rainwater, and whenever it rained, he would fill them up and save the water for later. But in the meantime, an incident occurs that completely breaks Chuck. His friend Wilson, who is a football, falls into the water. By the time Chuck realizes it, Wilson has already drifted far away. Still, Chuck jumps into the water and tries to bring him back, but he fails in his attempt. After returning to his raft, Chuck cries a lot because Wilson was the one he had been talking to for the past 4 years, and Wilson was his very good friend. You might find it strange that Chuck felt so sad about losing a football, but for Chuck, Wilson was not just a football. He had been talking to it for the past 4 years. For him, it had an existence of its own, which is why he was emotionally connected to it. This is the reason Chuck felt deep sorrow when Wilson was lost. After this, Chuck continues his journey. After traveling for a few more days, when he is completely exhausted and broken, a cargo ship passes by. The crew notices him and rescues him. Chuck has now returned to his home, to his place. But after returning, we see that everything has changed. The people who were Chuck's friends and family members had assumed that Chuck was dead, and they had even held his funeral. His girlfriend Kelly, who loved him very much, and Chuck also loved her, has now gotten married and has a daughter. Chuck goes to meet Kelly, and she is very happy to see him and hugs him. However, Kelly now has her own family, so she cannot go with Chuck, and they both decide that their paths have now separated. Kelly had given Chuck a watch, which he had with him even on the island. He returns the watch to her, as it is a family heirloom of Kelly's. Chuck says that a family heirloom should stay with the family, but Chuck keeps Kelly's photo with him. Before leaving, Kelly tells him that he had promised to come back. Chuck says, "I am so sorry." Kelly says, "Me too." And before leaving, Kelly kisses him because she still loves him, but she cannot leave her family. Kelly also has a car that belongs to Chuck, with many memories attached to it. Kelly returns the car keys to Chuck. He gets into the car and drives away. But when Chuck drives a little ahead, Kelly stands behind, watching him leave, and she feels a deep sadness, thinking that something is being left behind. Calling Chuck's name, she runs after the car, and Chuck stops, brings the car back, and hugs her. Kelly says, "I knew you were alive, you would come back, but everyone told me I had to stop thinking about it. I still love you so much. You are my first love." Chuck says, "I love you too." They kiss each other. Chuck puts her in the car, and it seems that Chuck and Kelly are about to leave together. But after thinking for a while, Chuck says, "Kelly, you should go back home." And he drives her back to her house. After this, we see Chuck sitting with his friends, and he is very sad. He tells them that maybe he would have died on that island or committed suicide. He even thought about committing suicide, made a rope, and tried to hang himself, but he couldn't do it because he had to return for Kelly. So he kept living because of Kelly, and that's why he just kept breathing. Maybe he even fell ill, but he lived only for Kelly. And now, when he has returned, he has lost Kelly. He gets very emotional, and in the end, we see that Chuck still has a package that he brought back from the island when his ship sank. Many packages washed up on the shore, and one of them is still with him, on which angel wings are drawn. In fact, this is the last package he had on that island that he never opened, and he thinks that if he ever returns home, he will deliver this package because he is very responsible in his work. Somewhere, this was also a reason why he kept himself alive, as he had a strong sense of duty. He comes back to deliver the package, but there's no one at home. So he leaves it at the door with a note that reads, "This packet saved my life, thank you, Chuck Noland." And then he walks away. This is where the story ends. From this story, we learn that no matter what circumstances we face in life, we must face them with courage and determination. Only then can we succeed. After listening to this story, I have a question for you. If you were stuck in such a situation and were in Chuck's position, what steps would you take to stay alive? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.